Stephen, just let me know when you're all set up and ready to go and we can kick this off.
If I could find the
All right, it just slipped over to 3 o'clock Eastern. So hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to day 2 of the 2021 Virtual Christmas Summit, sponsored by Boscoyo Studio. All of the presentations in this room are specifically sponsored by Light-O-Rama. Our next presentation is Input Triggers with Light-O-Rama by Stephen Blue. During the presentation, please do not unmute yourself or start your video, unless you're Stephen. You are welcome to use the chat to ask relevant questions about the presentation, since other attendees or the host might be able to answer your question, but please save questions directed at the presenter for the end of the session during the Q&A. At that point, you'll be allowed to unmute yourself to ask questions or put them in chat. Thank you all for attending, and I will turn it over to Stephen.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Stephen Blue. Thank you for attending this. What I hope will be an interesting 20 minutes or so. We're going to be talking about input triggers and making your light show interactive using Light-O-Rama. These input triggers, in short, can be used to start sequences and control elements, and basically allow your users to engage, your visitors to engage with your light show and make them part of the show and not just viewers of the show. The slide that you've seen in all the presentations, a little bit about me. I first started lighting in 1996 at the age of 12. Things have gotten nothing but better from that picture, both in terms of light show and in video quality. I operate a hybrid sequenced plus static walkthrough display. I don't operate a display at my house. I'm 1,500 feet back in the woods, but I have access to an open grass field that I built a walkthrough display. That little square at the bottom at the mega tree and the 4 trees around it are a musical Light-O-Rama show, and the rest of it is a walkthrough static with interactive features. By day, I'm a real estate and college sports photographer, although recently removed from a 12-year career in IT with the local government and school system. And 3 interesting things about me: I'm a 3-time cardboard boat regatta champion. I umpired baseball on ESPN in the Little League World Series. And if you go on Google Maps, put on satellite view on top of my display, you can see me in the middle of setup. There's the shadows of my mega tree, and that is my truck pulling my trailer out. There I am. I know that's me. That's about 5 years ago. It shows you how often Google cares about refreshing the images of my little town. Anyway, for the next 15, 20 minutes, we're going to be talking about what you can do with triggers, the types of triggers and sensors, the Light-O-Rama hardware necessary to bring these triggers into your show, a few sequencing tips for creating the sequences, a few pros and cons, and questions, conversations, virtual tomato throwing if I really jack this up. So, here we go. So what can you do with the interactive inputs? I put 3 pictures down here just as examples. You can have a button, a push button control panel, so that you can do anything from activate a sequence to choosing a song to activate a prop with a button. Light-O-Rama actually sells a motion detector that can be used for a great number of things. And this is the Virtual Christmas Summit, but if you do Halloween, imagine the possibilities of a motion activated prop. And it'll also accept low voltage inputs if you're getting really complex from something that's running something with a little bit more logic to it, like an Arduino or a Pi, can be used to trigger a Light-O-Rama sequence for the animation to go. What have I built? My biggest thing is the interactive walk-in mega tree. It's a 20-foot mega tree. It doesn't have a center pole. It's got a U-shaped frame. It has red and green super strings and strobe lights hanging up inside of it. It uses 31 channels, so 2 controllers, and a Light-O-Rama input pup. I'll tell you more about the Light-O-Rama input pup here in a second. But basically, it's 20 foot tall with an 8 foot diameter. There's the control panel. You can see that the users have the opportunity to select a solid color, or they can make it spin in either color, or a strobe. The reason why there's a big gap there, it was planned to, right now it's red and green. It was planned to have blue and white, make it a 4-color tree. It just hasn't been necessary, but it's there. And a couple of daytime photos to kind of give you an idea of how the structure was created. As far as the buttons you have options are, there's a ton of buttons out there. Pretty much anything, either normally open, normally closed, some kind of momentary push button will work just fine. What I use, and this isn't an endorsement or anything, it's just what I've bought, it's what I've used, is the 2-inch 12-volt push buttons from allelectronics.com. They have a bunch of different sizes and shapes and colors. The round 2 inches are the ones that I've used. And I will just say that I've been doing the walk-in tree since 2015, and I still have a couple of original buttons on my control panel. A couple of the other ones have broke. They get abused. The kids love to pound on those things, even if they're asked not to. And I have to say, for $5 a button, these things hold up extremely well, extremely well. The 12 volt is electricity that comes, that powers the light that's on the inside. I just wire in a little 12 volt adapter to light those up. The voltage for the actual inputs comes from the Light-O-Rama board. So we'll see that in a minute. Again, this is the input motion sensor that Light-O-Rama sells. You can find it on their store on the accessories page. I bought one, I played with it. I don't really have any use for it, and for my uses. I've had some thoughts of things that could happen. And one of the things I've thought about, frankly, is a security measure to only activate these things after the show shuts down, and have them, if they detect motion within the display, to turn on a couple of floodlights, dedicate a channel to a couple of floodlights, just as a security measure. Again, in Halloween, you got all kinds of options, and let your imagination run what you could possibly do with a motion sensor. I don't have a slide for the doing Arduinos and stuff like that. If I have a second, I'll show you all something that's a work in progress that's sitting behind me. But long story short, I've got an Arduino that's running game logic for a little snowball fight game between 2 home-built wireframe snowmen that throw snowballs back and forth at each other. And I use Light-O-Rama to do the sequencing to throw the snowballs back and forth, and the game logic to keep the score runs through the Arduino. So question is how do you bring these inputs into Light-O-Rama? Well, the first thing is you've got to plug the buttons in. So you've got 3 options, really. The one that I prefer and that I use exclusively is the input pup. This is an inexpensive little device that they sell. I think it's $29, and I think you maybe get $5 off of it during the sales. I don't quote me on that, but it's an inexpensive little device. You see on top of it that it's got the 2 network jacks, so it daisy chains into your Light-O-Rama network, just like a controller. It gets a unit ID just like a controller does. And then on the bottom, you can see that it's got those 8 inputs and a ground. That's what you will plug your buttons into. You'll use some just low voltage wire. There's a voltage input there that you don't need, being that the Light-O-Rama board, the Light-O-Rama network will provide the power for you over the Ethernet. But again, you get the option of 8 inputs per one of these controllers. The input headers, now on the middle image, these will connect to the CTB32s or the 1602 AC controllers. They will provide, depending on, I'm a little fuzzy on, I don't use these. I'm a little fuzzy on exactly how the number of inputs work. In some situations, only 3 inputs will work. On some situations, 6 inputs will work. That's frankly, a Light-O-Rama help desk question that I'd like to ask one day. But you will be able to hook your buttons directly to a controller. Finally, there are input jumpers on, I'm going to say most, if not all, Light-O-Rama boards. I went through, I didn't click on every board's documentation, but I went through most of them. And most of them had at least 1 or 2 input jumpers that will allow you to put inputs directly onto a board. I will show you in the hardware editor, our hardware tool, where you'll be able to see those and set those up. Long story short, I prefer the input pup because the fact that in my situation, I built a control panel and the input pup lives on the backside of the control panel with the buttons. I don't want to have a bunch of low voltage wiring running out of the back of the control panel over to where my controller is. I'd rather just keep it all nice and contained right there. That's why I like the input pup. It's really cheap, really easy to use. But if you're only doing a 1 trigger thing, it might be in your advantage to run it straight off of a board. All right, I am going to leave this up for a moment, but we're going to go live on my screen here in a minute. This is for setting up the interactives in a Light-O-Rama show. Now, we all know what the show editor looks like, and we've all seen that interactive tab over on the right-hand side. And when you click to add an interactive group, you're presented with one of 3 options: jukebox, soundboard, or magic toy. Now, there's some distinctions between these that are important. First off, jukebox is going to, when it sees a input in the group, it's going to check to see if a sequence is already running. If there's already a sequence already running, it's not going to play it. But if you're sitting there and there's nothing happening, it's going to initiate whatever input you link or whatever sequence you link to that input. I rarely use that one. In fact, I've never used it in production. I've played with it, but I've never actually used it in production. What it could be used for is if, let's say, you don't want music playing constantly outside your house if nobody's there, but you want a sequence to go off if somebody pulls up. Here would be an instance where you could have a button or a motion detector. Somebody drives by, the motion detector picks up the car, it starts a musical sequence. The soundboard is one that I have used a lot. It actually is the one that runs the walk-in tree that I showed earlier. It will run whatever, no matter what's happening, it will run the sequence that is triggered and will stop the sequence that was playing before. So I'll demonstrate that in a minute. But so let's say the walk-in tree is doing a green spin and somebody presses the red solid button. The green spin sequence will immediately stop. The red solid sequence will begin immediately after that. The magic toy is kind of cool in that it will allow multiple sequences to be running at the same time. There's a trick you got to do to make it work, but what it will happen is, let's say you have 10 mini trees and you have 10 buttons, and you want to have each button turn that tree a color. It will allow somebody to be pressing a whole bunch of buttons, and it will run the sequence of each individual mini tree simultaneously as they're pushed without interference. The one thing is that you cannot run, for obvious reasons, you can't run musical sequences doing this because it can't play multiple songs at the same time. It's only going to do animation sequences. So I'm going to unshare my screen here. Or excuse me, I'm not going to unshare my screen. I'm going to in PowerPoint rather. And I am going to move zoom out of my way. Move that out of my way. All right. And Aubrey, could you just confirm with me that y'all can see the show editor on my screen?
Yes, I can see the show editor.
Thank you. All right, so here is show editor. We're all familiar with it. We all mostly use just musical sequences. Occasionally we'll do a startup or a background. But in this case, we've got an interactive sequence. So I'm going to pull up my soundboard show that I set up just for this. Normally you'll run your interactive groups along with your musical sequences, but I don't have, this is not my show computer, so I don't have those loaded on here. So I'm going to show you this walk-in tree soundboard, and here's what it looks like. I have 5 buttons on the board, again, red and green solid, red and green spin, and a strobing option. So each, the input pup on the back of the controller is 1F is the unit ID. I have the 5 inputs, and if I hit this edit button, it will show me that 1F input 1 is linked to this LOR sequence file. And if I wanted to edit it, I could. I would just pick a sequence, and it would work. And so when you do that, or if, now I said that for the Magic Toy, you have to do something a little bit different. You'll see that I have Magic Toy, I have 5 different interactive groups, and that's one for each of the 5 triggers I have set up for the Magic Toy. And each one corresponds to 1 input. That's so that they'll all run simultaneously. Now I am going to stop screen sharing, and I'm going to make this big, and if everybody will just look at me for a moment. That's not me. I want to see me, so we can make sure that y'all are able to see what I've got going on.
We can see you right now. Is that what we're trying to see?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to see. Every time I went into speaker view to make it big, all I saw was you.
Yeah, no, we see you and we see buttons behind you.
That's okay. All right, so I'm going to pull this chair out the way here. Now I am going to do a show on demand of the soundboard show, which is the show's going to be COM port is open because I have hardware utility running. All right, there we go. Show is running now. So I have a startup sequence in this show that automatically lights up these trees. Now, these are not something that I use in production. It's something that I just built for today. This is how I do the walk-in tree. The walk-in tree lights up when the show starts because nobody's hit a trigger, and then it sits there and it waits. So when somebody comes up, presses the red button, they show red, green. This is what the kids do all night long. I do the red, they'll do the little spin thing. I'm pressing that. Okay, if I do the strobe will come on. And the way that I have the sequences rigged is that they will eventually go into a loop at the end that is just a 5-second loop of the static that I leave the tree at when nobody is using it. So if I hit the green or I hit the red spin, it'll sit here and it'll spin. I rigged this to spin for about 5 or 6 seconds, and then it will go back into just a static deal. To show you how this controller, just a little bit of behind the scenes, is I've got everything this is about a half-inch piece of manufactured board. I've got everything with just a Tupperware container screwed and glued on top of it, but it's pretty easy to get off. The little 12-volt adapter for the button power, the button lights are in there. And that is the long story short. I will also show you a little bit of a detail of this is the input pump. You can see how small it is with the two Ethernets in and all the jacks. It's a really simple little board. This is the button that I use. This is the all electronics 2-inch button that I use. It's got about a 3/4. You can mount it up to about a 3/4 inch little LED light on the inside, and it works really well. Realize we're 3:20 already, so going to go back to sharing my screen. And we're going to go back to this. Now there are some pros and cons. Sorry, that's the wrong swap. There are some pros and cons to this. Pros, buttons are fun. It's something different and unique for kids of all ages. Buttons are fun. They keep people engaged. Buttons are fun. Who doesn't like pressing buttons? Now, there are some cons. Not everybody wants people in their yard. There's some liability concerns in there. And if you have crowd control issues, it's going to keep people there longer because it engages them. But one display I've seen, it was actually a Great Christmas Light Fight display. They put all of their buttons on the edge of the sidewalk, on the edge of their yard, so that people stayed on the sidewalk the entire time and activated things within their yard. So anyway, the time has gotten, I swear I had this timed out better than this, but I'm going to go ahead and open it up to, oh, I just can't win with PowerPoint today. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions. And if we don't have any questions, I'll talk for another couple of minutes.
All right, if you have any questions, you can either unmute yourself or post in chat.
Jim makes a good point. I don't have an enhanced LR network, and but the input pump can't be used on the ELOR network. That's a valid point. Can you control a fogger? Yeah, if you can rig. So the fogger is going to be constantly powered, but the control for that, if I'm not mistaken, is low voltage. So you're probably going to use one of the Light-O-Rama low voltage boards. I think it's the 24D maybe. But you could do a sequence that acts as the remote control on that and trigger the fogger that way. It would take some experimentation, but I don't see why you couldn't do it. All right, can you use an Internet of Things device tied to an app instead of a button? Good question. If you could, if you have an Internet of Things, an IoT device that can output a low voltage charge, yes, I believe. Oh, read the documentation before you believe me on this, but I think the inputs are 5 volts. So if you can get the IoT device to put 5 volts out onto an input, yes, you could use you could use an app instead of a button press to do that. Part of what I'm doing for next year is I've got an Arduino that's running game logic for a snowball fight. The Arduino is sending a 5 volt, the triggers are actually running into the Arduino. The Arduino then sends a 5 volt to the input pump to trigger the light sequence while the game logic calculates everything out and runs the scoreboard. So long answer to a short question, yes. And Jerry, wow, somebody knows where Deltaville is. We're a town of less than 1,000 people. That's fantastic. Sorry that you were here for that reason. Will the input pup work with servos too, such as I don't see why not. The input pup, as long as the servos are run through a Light-O-Rama sequence, yes. I'll tell you exactly how much I know about servos and Light-O-Rama. I know that they exist. That's all I know. But as long as you can, if the servos run through a sequence, a Light-O-Rama sequence, then the answer is yes. The input pup will work. The input pup is just using the input pup is just telling Light-O-Rama to activate a sequence. Things to turn 5-volt power supply that feeds to the 5-volt. Turn on the 5-volt power. Use an energy device to turn on a 5 that feeds 5-volt to the trigger, right? Yeah. If I'm understanding what you're saying, Nuno, that sounds accurate. That sounds accurate. I don't see why not. Again, never done it, but it sounds really interesting. And I actually had toyed personally with one of my brainstorms was, could I put an Amazon Echo out hidden somewhere and change the keyword to "Hey Christmas tree, turn on green lights" and do something like that. It was really just a brainstorm. I've got lots of brainstorms. Putting an outdoor keyboard out there with the keys tied to triggers to turn things on. A Christmas village display that with like Lamax stuff that turns on, use buttons to turn on Ferris wheels and moving options, things like that. Lots of ideas in the works that are anywhere from 2 to 20 years away. So.
All right, with that, I'm gonna grab it back from you there and thank everybody for joining us. Thank you for teaching, and thank you to Boscoyo and Light-O-Rama for sponsoring this Zoom room and the entire conference. So we're gonna take a brief 5-minute break here to switch presenters, and we will start our question and answer period with Drew Hickman of Holiday Technologies coming up next. If you plan to stay, please do not unmute yourself during the transition, just so that the host can easily communicate if we need to. A reminder that the closing session is in the main Boscoyo room today at 5 p.m. Eastern, so be sure to head over there after the presentations are done for the day.